dressed up in this pose, keep it pimping always. Actions do the talking. I know you want the car, so I ain't saying y'all name. Oh, you out here.
What's up, guys, and happy Hyperhidrosis Awareness Month. That's right, there's a month for everything. I figured in honor of the big occasion that I would talk a little bit more about hyperhidrosis. Now, it's not a secret that I have this condition. I've talked about it like a bunch on my channel, but if you're new here, I feel like I should fill you in. So hyperhidrosis is excessive sweating. I have it in my hands as well as my feet and possibly my armpits, but I can't tell because I might have grown out of it there. But it is a condition that affects like 5% of the population, so quite a few people have it, but I'm gonna venture to guess that maybe a lot of people don't know that they have it or like don't know that it has a name. And just some like quick facts about it. If you have hyperhidrosis, you're like way more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and have ADD. You're like 3 times more prone to skin infections and eczema, things like that. Oh, apparently it like decreases quality of life more than like most other skin conditions, such as severe acne, and I think psoriasis is one of them, and like severely itchy skin. I'm not sure what the name for that one is. So just some fun facts. Thus far in my channel, I've made a short film about hyperhidrosis, and I've made kind of like an overview video where I talk about what it is, my story with it, how it affects my life, like what some advice for you if you also have it. But I kind of rewatched that video recently, and like it's very much an overview. Like I did not go into nearly as much detail as I could have because I feel like I have overcome it in a lot of ways and I'm doing a lot better now. So it's just hard to like look back on some of the ways that it's severely affected me. Guys, you can do it. Guys, I am doing so much better than I used to do with it. So if you're like really struggling with it, I have good news for you. Let's start way back at the beginning. I've always had hyperhidrosis. I remember in 3rd grade, like struggling with school because I needed something to wipe my hands on constantly. And I remember wiping my hands on the bottom of my desk constantly during class, all the way through 5th grade, just so that I could write on my papers without them getting wet. What else do I remember? I feel like I remember taking gymnastics when I was like 4 years old and like wiping my hands on the warm-up floor or whatever while I was stretching. Other early memories include guitar lessons, which I took for like a year, I think, when I was maybe 10. Those were a trip because it was for sure the first time my guitar teacher had ever seen a 10-year-old with sweat like dripping down her hands and no self-awareness that wasn't really normal. I just remember he was very accommodating. I always had a towel with me. I wasn't like embarrassed or anything, I don't think, but it did make guitar a little bit more difficult. And then my mom says that a lot of the drawings and stuff I did when I was really little have smeared marker and pen and whatnot, but I guess she didn't think anything of it because like marker smears sometimes. But now that I'm older, I'm convinced that it was probably because my hands were sweating when I was very, very young. Those are my youngest memories. Then we move in to middle school. It was around middle school that I realized I could not wear certain shirts because of the pit stains being so bad. So I have one very embarrassing memory that comes to mind when I think of like my armpits sweating that I'm not even gonna share right now. But just know that in middle school, that's when I realized, you know, gray shirts, they weren't gonna happen. Honestly, at this point in my closet, I don't even think about what shirt I'm gonna wear anymore because my closet just accommodates me. But I guess it took a little while to get there. And then we get to high school. So if I were to summarize the biggest way that hyperhidrosis has affected my life, it would be that it made high school and just school in general really, really, really difficult. I don't even really know where to begin describing to you like how difficult it was to get through a day of high school with my hands literally dripping sweat like all day. I'm gonna start just by saying what's obvious to me, but what might not be obvious to you, which is that writing on paper when your hands are wet doesn't really work. Pen smears, marker smears, pencil even smears sometimes. And then obviously if the paper is wet, you can't write on it, period. The solution to this for me is just to write with a piece of paper under my hand. But anytime up through college where you had to take an exam or like the tax test, or that's what they call it in Texas, any kind of standardized test, I wouldn't have an extra paper to put under my hand. So those days were always really stressful for me, and a lot of times I would bring like an extra jacket or something so that I could wipe my hands off on it during the exam so that I'm not getting my Scantron wet, because they would like scare you about how if you bubble just outside the line on your Scantron, it's not going to work, it's not going to scan. So I could only imagine what would happen if the Scantron was wrinkly, going through the machine. Maybe realistically nothing would have happened, but that was something that always really stressed me out on test day, was like, what if I mess up my Scantron because of my sweaty hands? Thinking back on it now, I probably could have just asked for a piece of scratch paper. I think you were allowed to have one, but I wasn't gonna do that. I never did that. While I'm on the subject of writing, I also want to talk about journaling a little bit, because I talk about journaling on my channel a lot. It's like kind of one of my hobbies, and I can really only journal when my hands are not sweating, which is not very often. I would say my hands are sweating probably 80% of the time. I can journal while my hands are sweating if I just put a piece of paper under my hand and like hope for the best. But it's a lot more stressful trying to do my fun, relaxing activity when my hands are like dripping sweat, and the whole time I'm writing, I'm just like trying not to get my paper wet so my pen doesn't smear. So that's really fun, because that's like one of my favorite hobbies. Back to school. So I did theater like all 4 years of high school. I had a lot of different parts in theater. So whenever I did tech, probably one of my favorite memories was helping build the set for one of the plays that we did one year. But within that memory is like a lot of having to explain why my hands were so wet, because everything that we did was very hands-on. I'd be using saws, I'd be drilling things and stapling things, and every time I was done with the tool, I'd have to hand it on to somebody else, and it would be wet from my hands. And all my friends were like very understanding about it. Like I had to tell them, because they would literally be like, But just the fact that I had to explain is like a little bit traumatizing for somebody in high school who's already dealing with like all the social pressures at that time. Another thing I did in theater was hair and makeup, which is also a great time to mention that another one of my passions and favorite hobbies is doing makeup. Well, guess what? To do makeup, you have to touch your face. To do makeup on other people, you have to touch their faces. This is not something that I'm generally fond of doing when my hands are like dripping sweat. A lot of times when I'm doing my own makeup, I have to like put something under my hand to keep my hand from touching my face. And it's the same with hair, guys. If my hands are sweating in the morning, I literally cannot do my hair that day. If I had hopes of French braiding my hair, of doing space buns, of doing literally any kind of hairstyle, including the hairstyle I have going on right now, which is just waking up and going like this, I can't do it if my hands are sweating. When your hands are wet, they literally just stick to your hair, and you feel like you're getting your hair all gross, and it literally sucks. You have no idea how many days I want to French braid my hair, and I literally can't, because it makes it so difficult when my hands are wet, and because I don't want to get my hair dirty with sweat. So same issues apply to when I was doing hair and makeup for theater, like dealing with wigs and bobby pins that just slip out of your hands. Also in theater, I did a little bit of acting. This involved, say, holding a script for a long period of time. My scripts were always super wrinkly. They would even tear on the edges sometimes. And it's because I'd have to sit there and hold it for so long with my hands just like getting it all wet. Also acting, you have to touch other people. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but that was always traumatizing for me. Being on stage with everybody watching and then like having to touch anybody with hands that were like so wet. I also did cheer for 1 year in high school. I want you to think about maybe stunting, having to like, I was always a back spot that involved like holding the girls' ankles up and once again just like touching other people. Stretching and like doing tumbling and stuff on slippery floors is terrifying and for sure dangerous, and I probably should have never done it and should never do it. People frequently suggest that I do yoga as like a hobby or like as a way of stretching, and I literally can't if I'm on slippery floor. Like when I was in college for 4 years, my apartment had concrete floors. There was no way I would be able to do yoga in that, because you can imagine me like in a position like with my butt in the air and my hands on the ground. My hands would just slowly be slipping forward. This would even happen on carpet, like in tumbling. Do you realize how often back bends are involved in like cheer and tumbling and things? My hands would just be sliding backwards. Those are pretty much all of my like activities I did in high school, but in general, high school was just so anxiety inducing for me. And I literally didn't even realize how anxious I constantly was on a daily basis because of how wet my hands were until I got to college. And the reason for the anxiety in high school was just because I would get to school every morning, and if my hands weren't sweating, it was just a waiting game until they did. And it's like that literally every day of my life. If my hands aren't sweating already from the moment I wake up, which by the way is very stressful to like wake up and immediately have your hands start dripping and having to like run and get a towel, such a horrible way to wake up in the morning. Then I wake up just waiting for it to happen, basically. It's like, can I get ready in time can I do my hair and makeup in time before my hands start sweating? Well, guess what? If I'm thinking about it constantly and worrying about it, then I get more anxious and it makes it more likely my hands are gonna start sweating any moment. I've only had like a handful of panic attacks in my lifetime, and like every single one of them was me trying to get ready in the morning and like physically not being able to because my hands were sweating so bad. And it's definitely kind of a mental block because technically, I could do my makeup and just rest my wet hand on my face. Technically, I could probably find out a way to do my hair with my hands wet, but it would just be more difficult and it would once again just be so gross, and it's just so much more stressful that way. I love getting ready. I wish I could do it in like a relaxing way, but a lot of times I can't. Basically, I would get to school every morning and it would just be a waiting game for when are my hands gonna start sweating, because once my hands start sweating, then it proceeds to be impossible for me to do my work for the entire rest of the day. I would have to ask to go to the bathroom sometimes just to wash my hands, or like literally just to get a towel and wipe my hands off on it, because I don't know how to describe the amount of anxiety. Imagine this. You get to class, people are filing in, your hands out of nowhere start dripping sweat. Maybe today you wanted to dress cute and wear a dress or shorts, so you know you don't have anything to wipe your hands off on because you're not wearing pants, and you can just feel the water starting to like pour out of your hand. You get your paper, it's timed. You might have to do a timed writing. You're already stressed from that, and now you're trying not to ruin the paper and get everything wet, but you have nothing to wipe your hands off on. You ask to go to the bathroom one time just to take a breath, just to calm down. When you finally finish your paper, you get up to turn it in. Your shorts or whatever have like sweat stains from your hands being wiped off in the same place, and you're hoping nobody notices. You're so relieved when that bell rings and you can put your stuff up and like wipe your hands off on your backpack sneakily. That's my best description of how it feels. It basically feels like you're trapped because you're so uncomfortable, and you feel gross, and you want to just stop whatever you're doing because you're having a hard time doing it, you're struggling, but you can't stop. You have to finish it because you're at school, and you just have to keep working despite the condition. Honestly, I'm wondering if I could have gotten some kind of accommodation for this. I probably could have, but that's not really something I ever thought about in high school. But just like the social stigma around that, like, cause really the accommodation I needed was just a towel. I really just needed a towel to wipe my hands off on to do my work. I wouldn't have had to ask, I don't think, my teacher for like a towel or anything. I could have just whipped a towel out. But then everybody would know that I'm like sweating so bad. And like the number one thing in high school for me was don't let anybody know. Sorry, it's just really hard to talk about because I've come a long way from that. But at the same time, I feel like if I were put in that situation again, I would behave the same way. I would like to think that I've grown past being like so embarrassed about it and like anxious about it, but like that's not true. If I were in a situation where I were trapped in a room and forced to do something that I couldn't hardly do because of my condition, and there was like no way of getting out of that, I feel like I would also end up having a panic attack like the same way that I felt in high school. It's just hard to come to terms with that there's like nothing I could really do to make it easier or to make myself feel better about it. And the worst thing about high school is that the days were so long. It was just like one class period after another, after another, after another. And by the time I got home, I would be exhausted on some days. My hands would be swollen because they sweat that much. Because my hands sweat a lot, period. It could be freezing cold outside, and I'm cold all the time. I feel like I'm cold-natured, and my hands sweat all the time anyways. All it does is make my hands feel like an actual block of ice, and it increases my risk of hypothermia. That's all it does. But you figure when I'm anxious about my hands sweating, as the anxiety increases, my hands sweat more, and then that makes me more anxious, and then they sweat more, and it's a cycle that leads you straight into a panic. And I feel like that's what a day in high school was like for me. And obviously some days were better than others, and I feel like I had a good high school experience. Like, I enjoyed theater a lot, and I was in French club, like all the random stuff I did. But it was also really hard just to get through the day with my condition. So yeah, that was high school. My heart is beating so fast, just reliving the anxiety. Then I got to college, and college changed my life because I didn't have to be at school for 7 hours straight. I could pick my own schedule and I could have breaks in between my classes where I could cool down, cool off. I also did not see the same people every day, so I didn't care if they saw me holding a towel in class or something. That's not entirely true. I did care. I didn't really want people to see me doing it, but I figured whatever. If the random girl sitting next to me notices that I have a towel on my lap, she won't know why I have it there, and she won't really care, and she won't remember me the next day. College was so much better. Obviously, I still had to do homework, and I still had to take notes in class. I still had like a touchscreen computer and a touchscreen phone that also doesn't work when your hands are wet. The biggest issue in college, and like the next way that this affects my life, is that I had to walk outside to get to my classes, and I live in Tejas. It is very, very hot. This meant that a lot of days I wanted to wear shorts to class because everybody was wearing shorts to class. And guess what? I couldn't do that because if I wore shorts, I would have nothing to wipe my hands off on in class. That was a struggle. That still is a struggle. Every day, my outfit basically revolves around whether or not my hands are gonna sweat that day and if I'm gonna need something to wipe my hands off on. And it sucks because I really like fashion and I have a lot of things I wanna wear and I can't wear. My feet sweat too. This affects my life less because I wear tennis shoes like every single day. Do my tennis shoes smell horrible? Yes, they do. They absolutely do. They smell like my brother's, and he is an 18-year-old athlete. But I just like can't really wear sandals or anything because dirt will stick to my feet and my feet will slip and slide in the sandals. If I wear flip-flops, they'll literally slide out of my flip-flops. Same with heels. My feet will slide down to the bottom of my heels and my heels won't feel like they fit anymore. So they for sure affect like what shoe wear I wear. But I'm over that. Not everything can bother me. I'm fine with wearing tennis shoes every day. It's whatever. And then there's just an infinite number of other ways that hyperhidrosis affects my life on a daily basis. Off the top of my head, let's see. I can't use tape. I can't open anything. I can't wear rings a lot of times because my hands will like rust them or they'll get swollen by the end of the day and then I can't get my rings off. I can't get my necklaces clasped ever because my fingers are so slippery and I have no grip strength. If I ever had a grip onto something for my dear life, like monkey bars or something, I would literally die. Like I have hyperhidrosis nightmares about like hanging off the edge of a cliff or something because I know if that were to ever happen to me, I have no grip strength. Also, just never feeling like I'm the right temperature when I'm sweating. Touching things, I can't feel things. I have lied to almost every single person who has ever asked me to feel something because I can't feel how soft a blanket when my hand is wet. My hand just like sticks to the blanket kind of and it doesn't feel like anything. When I pet my dogs, all the dog hair sticks to my hands. I have to wash my hands off like every single time. It's a lot of just little things like unplugging things from the wall. I don't have grip strength. If there's something difficult to unplug, like an iPhone charger, they're like smooth on the outside. Our door, I can never open our front door because it's like kind of hard to open. And then the social stigma is just so much of it, like not wanting people to know. But all of that being said, so much of this I'm just used to. It's not something that actively upsets me very often. It is frustrating sometimes when I can't do something that I'm trying to do. For example, I'm about to pick up this water bottle down here. My hands are dry right now. I can't pick up my water bottle ever because my hand just slips off of it. If you have hyperhidrosis though, my number one tip for you is just to tell everybody. Keeping it such a secret was so stressful. People are just so much more understanding than you would ever know if you just told them about it. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be a very casual thing. I had a guy reach out to me on Instagram a while back and I was out of town when he sent me the message, so I wasn't gonna respond until I got back, and then he like deleted the message or something, so I never got a chance to respond. He was asking me about dating advice and how do you tell the person that you like about your hands sweating or whatever. The answer is the same way I've told every other friend of mine that my hands sweat. Usually I just wait until my hands are so frustrating to me that I have to say something about it, and then I say, oh my gosh, have I ever told you about how my hands sweat? And they're like, what? No. And I'm like, okay, well, I have this thing called hyperhidrosis. Basically, my hands sweat all the time, like for no reason. And right now, they're like so annoying. Like I can't even write on this paper because it's messing up the paper. And then they're like, oh, that's annoying. And boom, it's like a very natural way of telling somebody. Then from then on out, you just sprinkle it in here and there. Like whenever you want to say something about it. You say, oh, remember when I told you about my hands sweating? They're doing it again. This is so annoying. Because it really doesn't like take away from you as a person. If you treat it as something that you should be embarrassed embarrassed about, then people are going to react to it like it's something that you're embarrassed about. Don't be embarrassed about it. Just tell everybody about it. People don't care. I've told so many people about it. All of my friends have reacted pretty much the way I just told you. Like, one of my best friends, Kuma, I remember that being her reaction. I never would have known that you had something like this. Same with my friend Kaya. She said she never noticed it before. My friend Alan told me he had noticed it before, but that he had a friend who also had hyperhidrosis, so he just figured I had the same thing as his friend. The only bad reaction I've ever had was by one dude in high school who was kind of like, ugh, that's gross. And he said it around one of my friends, and one of my friends was like, no, it's not, and like grabbed my hand. But once you get older, nah, people are just adults about it. So that's my number one piece of advice, guys, because what's changed my life the most was going to college and being able to pick my own schedule and give myself time to like recover, and then telling everybody about it. It's not embarrassing if just everybody knows. So if you're in high school and you feel stuck, I'm giving you hope. High school can make you feel very trapped if you're struggling, but the world is actually very free when you get out of high school and you're opened up to it. I still have bad days for sure, but I've mostly learned how to cope with it. And like I said, I think it really only goes uphill after high school.
Stop.